As we were walking past, two police officers had tears in their eyes. By the side of our eyes, we caught my dad's truck. So we started running towards the truck. And as we got closer, we saw there was glass all over the road, rounded the truck, and there was his body. And he was partially covered up. I watched my mom drop to her knees. I heard her screaming. And as a kid, as a 17-year-old, I just stood there not knowing how to comprehend what I was looking at. And instead, I just hyper-focused on that ambulance. And I couldn't understand why nobody was helping him. She looked me in the face and she said, "Susan, everything that you have gone through since you're 17 years old is normal because you have PTSD." And I was really confused because I was like, wait a minute, I'm not in the military. I didn't go to war. What do you mean I have PTSD? And she said, anyone who has gone through anything traumatic can experience PTSD. I want my children to know that no matter what life hands you, you can heal from it. You can find strength in it. You can find healing, and you can find lessons. That is really important to me, to be able to give that to my adult children. And when I'm not here on this earth, I want them to say that their mom was someone who rose up, didn't fall into the victimhood, and became a survivor.
This is Alone and Unafraid. Welcome back to Alone and Unafraid, where we explore the intersections of everyday life, mental health, and mindset with ordinary people who have or are now facing incredible challenges. My name is Thad King, and I'm your host. Joining me today, per the usual, is my co-host, Tyler Huckett. He's a former 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment Airborne, MH-47 flight engineer. He's an entrepreneur. He's an adventure race fanatic, and he's the CEO of Polestar Coffee. Tyler brings his unique blend of experience, energy, and curiosity to every episode, and as always, he's here to keep the conversation raw and real. Welcome back, Tyler. What's up?
Hi.
And now I'm honored to introduce our guest for today, Susan Snow. Susan is the daughter of LAPD Detective Thomas C. Williams, who was tragically ambushed and killed on Halloween night in 1985 when she was just 17 years old. Susan's life changed forever that night, but her journey from devastating loss to recovery is nothing short of inspiring. She's a published author, speaker, and coach who has learned to manage PTSD, find healing through vulnerability, and embrace forgiveness over victimhood. Today, Susan works as a realtor in the Denver metro area, and she's here to share her powerful story of resilience and hope with us. Susan, we're truly honored to have you on the show.
Hello.
Hey, so you're out in Denver, and we've heard a lot of, and this is just kind of current events. We've heard all that stuff going on in Aurora. Is that near you, or have you had anything? Is that a real thing, or is that just hype from the news?
It is not real.
Okay. Yeah. So for
it's unfortunate, but it's not real.
Okay.
Where are you in Denver? I lived out there for a little while.
So
if you don't mind getting into that on this.
I'm in Castle Rock, which is about 30 minutes south.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I got a buddy who's on a SWAT team down there. I lived up in the Grant Ranch area of Littleton. Yeah.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Oh, is
Very
Littleton
familiar.
a suburb of Denver?
Yeah, it's just right there on like the southwest corner.
Oh, I thought that was like its own, like not in that metro area. So
well, it's just outside Denver County.
Yeah.
Oh.
So they're like the county line like came right down the road that we lived on and bounced back and forth. Because there was a Denver County school right across the street from my daughter's school, which was a Jefferson County school.
Yep.
All right. Well, so we kind of know your background, but if you wouldn't mind explaining to everybody how this all came to be, where in 1985, you're 17. Can you just kind of take it? Actually, let's start at the beginning. I think your father was a LA City of Los Angeles police officer, and so the entirety of you growing up, he was always a cop, right?
Yeah, pretty much. When I was really young, he went into the academy and graduated. I think I was like 5 or something like that. But, and back then, when you're young, I dealt with, little backlash from kids and the comments that they would make, that kind of thing. And then as I got older into being a teenager, that's when he started taking his class or his testing to become a detective. So he kind of worked himself up the ladder. And I believe he was detective 2 when he was killed. So he was a robbery homicide detective. So he saw the worst of the worst, but I will say for myself, I had a false sense of security because he was a detective and I knew that he came in after the fact. In my mind, he was never in danger. And unfortunately, that changed. On October 31st, he was investigating a robbery ring, and the man that was on trial was out on bail during his trial. And my dad, the plan was that I was going to try to go to a Halloween party that night. It was a school night. Dad said no that morning. We had some words about it.
As all dads do, right?
As all dads do. And, but I knew that he had a soft spot. So I was going to manipulate him.
Yeah.
Yep. I was going to manipulate him. And my plan was I was going home. I was going to clean the house. And then when he came home from picking up my brother, he would see that. And then he'd let me go to the party. Well, I came home, did just that. My mom came home a little bit later and she still had her costume on. She went off to get her costume off and I was putting mine on and the phone rang. And being the teenager I was, I thought, who's going to call my parents? This has got to be for me. So I ran across the room and I picked up the phone and it wasn't for me. It was a lady from my brother's school, Faith Baptist. And she said there was a drive-by shooting and my dad was involved. And by that time, my mom had rounded the corner and I just handed her the phone. As she was talking to this woman, I could see that her whole demeanor had changed. And I just knew it was bad. She got off the phone and she looked at me and said, "We're going to the school." So we got in the car. It was about less than a 10-minute drive away. And neither of us spoke to each other on the way. Once we got there, the way that Faith Baptist School is kind of laid out, there's the front of the school, the middle of the school actually has a parking lot. In after school care, the kids were let out on the back side of the school. So when we parked in the middle, we knew to just head towards the back side of the school, which is what we did. As we were walking towards the back of the school, we could see the lights of the cruisers that were parked around, and there was an ambulance that was sitting still in the street. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a trigger warning. As we were walking past, 2 police officers had tears in their eyes. And we caught, by the side of our eyes, we caught my dad's truck. So we started running towards the truck. And as we got closer, we saw there was glass all over the road, and rounded the truck, and there was his body. And he was partially covered up. I watched my mom drop to her knees, and I heard her screaming. And as a kid, as a 17-year-old, I just stood there not knowing how to comprehend what I was looking at. And instead, I just hyper-focused on that ambulance. And I couldn't understand why nobody was helping him. Soon enough, a couple of police officers took us by the arm and led us away from the scene and went into the school. And we went into an office. Now, by this time, I had no idea where my brother was. I didn't know if he was hurt. I didn't know what he saw. I didn't know anything. And as I sat in the office, my mom walked away. She was pulled away by some detectives to talk. And I sat there, and everything was swirling around in my head, and I just couldn't comprehend anything. And I felt helpless, and I was in complete denial of what I had actually seen. It wasn't until these 2 women who worked at the school were speaking to each other, and I could hear them say that Mr. Williams was deceased. And at that point, my world cracked. And I just wanted to run out of that room as far as I could go. But my body felt like cement. I couldn't physically move. And as this was happening, my mom came to me and she said, "I'm sending you with a neighbor." Now, understand, even though I wanted to run away, I still, as a kid, needed to be with my family unit. And I needed to be with my brother, and I needed to be with my mother, and I didn't get that chance.
I think at 17, you're right on that cusp of you kind of feel like an adult, and you could probably look like an adult, but emotionally, you're not an adult. You're still a child.
Oh, 100%. And I was, and granted, don't get me wrong, like this night was very chaotic. It was very chaotic. And I don't blame my mom. There's no blame there. She made a choice. And unfortunately, that choice, I had repercussions of it. As they sent me away with the neighbor, this poor neighbor knew us, knew my parents for many, many years. And she was trying to grasp herself what was happening, because our small, quiet little neighborhood became complete chaos. The streets were lined with police cars. We had overhead helicopters, and the media, because this was such a huge story, it was the first time in the annals of LAPD where an officer was actually assassinated. So the media converged as well. When I was at the neighbor's house, I was dating this guy. I had been dating him for 3 months. He was 19, and I needed him. So I told her to call, and she called him, but she didn't give him any information. So when he showed up, he just said, grab your coat. We're going to the hospital. What hospital is he at? Where's your mom? Where's your brother? You know, the normal questions that you would have. And I stood there at the door, just not being able to spit out the words. I couldn't say it. If I said it, it was real, and I didn't want to say it. And after a little bit of prodding, I finally just blurted it out. He's gone. And he kept saying, what do you mean he's gone? And I said, he's gone. He's not at a hospital. And this 19-year-old boy dropped to his knees and started to sob. And we were both just trying to figure out what happens next. Neither one of us had the skill, the tools, the support system to be able to navigate all of these things that were going on, all these feelings that were going on, and these emotions. And, but, you know, and back then in the 80s, there was no talk of mental health. There was very little known about PTSD. In fact, back then it was called shell shock, and it was attributed to military coming back from war. There were no resources for kids, none. So when I was able to go back to my house was filled with total strangers. And I felt like a stranger in my own house. Nobody came up to me, thank goodness, because at the time, I just wanted to be left alone. So I just made a beeline for my room, and I hid in there. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to do anything but just be in my little cocoon in my room with my boyfriend. And he left a little bit later. And I just spent the night in my room. I couldn't sleep. Obviously, it was, I was still trying to comprehend everything that was going on. And I didn't get to see my brother until the following day, like mid-afternoon. And he was okay. My dad saved his life. It was the last thing he did.
So he was in the truck at the time?
Yeah. So from then on, it was just, they didn't catch these guys for 6 days. So for 6 days, we had police presence in our front yard, our backyard, the helicopters. I had bodyguards. So anywhere I had to go, I had to have bodyguards with me. It's not a life that I wish on anyone. And like I said, being a kid, I had no idea what I was doing or how to function. I lived in a fog, pretty much. And it was hard. My mom had to concentrate on, she had things that she had to handle. And obviously had to be there for my brother since he was only 6. But I had a very strong sense of being kind of pushed aside and not feeling important.
Was it kind of like, you're kind of old enough to take care of yourself right now, I'm focusing on other things, or did it feel different than that? Or obviously when you're 17, it doesn't, you don't really know how it feels.
It was hard. I mean, our relationship prior to this was strained. My dad was kind of the go-between, the voice of reason between my mother and I. And that was really hard because my dad and I's relationship was much different. He was if you talk to anyone who knew him, he was a very present person. No matter who he was with, whether it was his child, his wife, his friends, his colleagues, he always made you feel like you were the most important person when he spoke to you. And I hear this from a lot of people that knew him, who worked with him, who trained with him. And that's how he was. And so I no longer had that. I no longer had that voice of reason. I no longer had that in between person. And I lost my dad, but that night I lost my mother as well. And that was that was like trauma on top of trauma. And even like at that time, even the media didn't know he had a teenage daughter for 2 days. So it just perpetuated this feeling like I wasn't important. And I felt like that. And I struggled with that because I had 17 years with him. And it was a frustration, like, hey, everyone, I lost my dad. I lost my best friend. I lost my sense of security. So much wrapped up in my father, and I lost it.
Did you did you go back to school immediately, or were you out during that time, or did your mom send you back to school, or?
Yeah, my mom sent me back to school probably a couple of weeks later. And I didn't last. And I talk about this in my book. There was a day where I was sitting in one of my classes and one of the kids turned to me and he said, so how many bullets hit your dad? And
yeah, how do you gosh.
Kids can be like the worst humans on the face of the planet. Like they can be the sweetest. Yeah.
Punched me in the face. I was like, oh, what? Because everything in my being, I wanted to get back to some sense of normalcy, but I didn't know how. And I thought school was my safe place because my friends were there. And it was hard too, because the other side of that is when you're in the media and when there's a big, it's a big deal in your community. And this was a national news story as well. And so I had kids that were like pretending to be my best friend. And, they were interviewed by news people and they would tell these fake stories about our friendship. And, and I just was like, what is happening?
How big was the school you went to?
It was pretty big. I mean, I think my senior, this was my senior year. I think my senior class was 400 and
holy crap
something kids. I think. And, so I left class. As soon as he said that to me, I just was like, I cannot do this. And I was kind of roaming through the hall, crying and really upset. And we had this Spanish teacher who was also a high school football coach, Coach Lugo. And he stopped me in the hallway. And he said, what's going on? What's wrong? Now everybody knew. And I told him what happened. And he said, kids are just just like you said it. Like, kids are dumb. They say things, they don't understand how that's going to affect you. I'm so sorry, and he's just like, what can I do? How can I support you? Let's go to the office. We'll call your mom and have you picked up, and, that kind of thing. So I remember that, and I am very grateful for that teacher, because at the time I was craving an adult to at least give me that sense that I was going to be okay.
Were there any other teachers that were in your corner for this, or that helped you out in that regard?
I think most of my teachers were, but I think a lot of them didn't know what to say. A lot like the kids around me, like they would look at me like I was going to break into a million pieces.
Just quiet whenever you walk into a
Very
room.
quiet.
Side eyes and whatnot.
Yeah, pretty much. Nobody knew what to say. I mean, it's not every day that, someone's dad is assassinated. It's just not, at the time, it would be considered almost like, because it happened at a school, it was the first school shooting situation. And so it was on everybody's mind, but nobody wanted to say anything. Nobody wanted to, they were too afraid, even my own friends. I'm just now having conversations with some of my closest friends about their reaction to that night. And I think writing my book kind of gave them like permission now, like to be able to talk about it and everything. So, it was a time, like I said, there was no real resources. So nobody really knew what to do with me. Nobody knew how to handle me. And even adults didn't, they would avoid the subject. They would avoid asking or saying anything or anything. It's just like everybody walked around on eggshells all the time. And that was weird.
During that time, the LAPD ended up getting or paying for you guys to go to counseling, right? Mm-hmm. And there's such a parallel with what I think you're about to say, and what a lot of veterans go through with counselors. But I'd like to hear your, when you go see a counselor in 1985 about, PTSD. And for the listeners, if you go back to listen to episode 10 with Doug White, he's a law enforcement officer, and he despises the term PTSD. He calls it PTS, because this isn't a disorder that's wrong with Susan. This is a thing that happened to Susan. And right. So his whole thing is this is post-traumatic stress.
Yep.
It's not that it's not that the person experiencing the stress has a problem.
Right.
And I think your experience with a therapist in 1985 kind of alludes in some ways to that. We probably had it wrong from the beginning of calling it a disorder than really what it is mm-hmm. something that happened to you. How was that experience with the therapist that the LAPD paid for you guys?
Well, back then I didn't know a whole lot about therapy. What I could tell you is at the time, because of my mindset and what I was experiencing, all you had to do was put me in the direction you needed me to go, and I would go there. So when my mom came to me and said, "You're going to therapy," this is what the advocate said we should do. And I said, okay. But in my mind, I thought, if you go to a therapist, you're crazy. So I was already thinking there was something wrong with me.
Right. Like you're broken. It's your fault.
Yeah. And so I
that
did.
Stigma that's there.
Yeah, I did. What I can say to you about him in hindsight is this. At the time, I don't think that he was qualified enough to handle the amount of trauma that I was experiencing. And because of that, he avoided any questions that would really open up that conversation. So, for instance, every time I went and saw him, he would only want to talk about my relationship with my mom, my brother, my boyfriend, and school.
The easily approachable subjects, right?
Absolutely.
You can do it with anybody.
Yep. And I think that it's because if he had asked me a certain question and it would have started down that road, I don't know if he was what I call trauma competent enough to be able to guide me in the right direction. So after in every session, I would say to myself, today's the day. Today's the day is going to make me feel better. Because by this time, I had suicidal ideation. I had severe depression. I had panic attacks. And I was dealing with all of that with no tools. So there were days where I wanted to die, but then I felt like I was going to die because I was having a panic attack, right? And so he never once asked me how that night affected me the whole entire time. After a year of seeing him and being hopeful that he was going to be the one adult in my life that was going to help me feel better, he looked at me and said, Susan, you're a well-rounded young lady, and you're going to be fine for the rest of your life, and I don't need to see you anymore. And I literally left his office thinking, that's it. I'm broken. I'm crazy. There's nothing anyone, including a professional, can do to help me. I'm going to have to figure this out all by myself.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like you want to go to these folks because you want them to say, oh, you're feeling this way because of this, and if you do these things, it will go away and you'll be better. And then you could feel like, oh, okay, it's not me. I just got to do what the thing that they said, and then I'm going to feel better. Here's the steps, 1, 2, 3, and I'm out the door, and everything's good. And a lot of therapists, and especially in our kind of line of work, is they don't really get that because they can't really relate, and they want to keep it in a safe spot, like you said. And it's not that they're intentionally trying to blow you off. It's just I don't know that they have the tools.
Right.
You know, when you tell somebody some horrific thing you've seen, and they live their life 9 to 5, and they go to and sit in an office with the cardigan and the thing, and they got their coffee, and life is good. When they hear horror stories like that, some of them just aren't equipped to deal with it. And that's kind of how we started this podcast. Was I just kind of went through some therapists that just weren't really getting it done. And I thought, I'll just do it myself. I feel better when I talk about things anyway, so I'll just talk to myself. And then I did an episode with Tyler, and then the rest is history. So I think there's some parallels there. But
absolutely.
And even though that was in 1985, it's 2024. We still have these kinds of issues out there.
What I was going to say with that story is like, there's a level of incompetence to not admitting when you're not qualified to do the job, right? When somebody's life is kind of in your hands, essentially, right? There's a make or break situation here, right? Like you left there broken. So dude broke situation completely by not being able to admit that he can't help, right?
Right.
And I've had 2 instances like that with the VA. The first time I walked in, when nobody walks into therapy saying, I'm happy to be here. You reluctantly pull yourself through that door every time.
Yep.
And like, especially on the first day when you walk in, you're like, hey, I'm in a really bad spot. I need help. So after about 15 minutes of questioning, from this mental health professional, air quotes over here. He looked at me and put his clipboard down. He's like, so what do you want? What do you want us to do about it? Was his question. And I kind of looked at him. I was like, what? And it was a very much like, so what? And so I was kind of like, fuck you. And then I left essentially after his buddy, whoever his partner was, said that we need to come up with an action plan for what I want to do with the rest of my life. I'm like, I assure you that's not the problem right now.
In your first session, no.
That was like 15 minutes.
In the VA. No.
I had a similar experience. I walked in there and I said, hey, I'd like to see a therapist. They said, well, what's the problem? And I was like, I don't know. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, it's like everything sucks.
Yeah. And they're the guy, like the taker-inner guy, like the intake like clerk, or I don't know what do you call those people?
The intake
taker-inner guy.
Taker-inner guy. Yeah, whatever that guy's called.
I think that's it.
He's like, well, you need to tell me what's wrong. And I was like, bro, if I knew it was wrong, I'd already have it fixed. I don't know what's wrong. He's like, well, what are your symptoms? And I was like, I don't, this is like the waiting room and all these people are in there. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you my like deepest, darkest secrets in front of all these people. And he's like, well, you need to tell me. And I was like, you know what? We're done here. And I walked out. I've never been back. And so,
the second time I don't even made a claim or whatever. And then I had to do like a telehealth assessment with this lady. And we talked for about 45 minutes, and 40 of those minutes, she was just asking me questions about high school. And she's like, oh, what was high school like? And I was like, oh, high school-y. And then she, the last like 4 minutes around, she's like, so you went to war? I was like, yeah. She's like, was that scary? I was like, yeah. She's like, all right, well, thanks for your time.
Oh, no.
And then they came back and they're like, there's absolutely no way you can have PTSD.
Oh, no. No.
Like, you guys are awesome. 0 for 2 with the VA. So I'm not a fan. So listening to your story, I was like, wow, the incompetence hasn't shifted.
No, like, it hasn't.
Yeah.
It hasn't. And you know what I got really good at, which I didn't know this is what I was doing, but what I got good at is listening to what other people said about me. So when I heard people say, oh my gosh, you're so strong, you're so brave, that was a mask that I would wear. It's my emotional mask and I talk about it all the time. My emotional mask, this doesn't affect me. I am brave. I am strong, and it doesn't matter what's going on around me. And I got really good at that. And I got good at living in fight or flight, which sucks because, right? And because it really keeps you from living life. I always was waiting for the ball to drop. I was always waiting for the rug to be ripped out from underneath me. And it continued for 14 years of my life. Now,
it's a razor's edge the whole time too.
Totally. And I married the boyfriend. He and I have been together 39 years.
Well, congratulations. It's a long
Thank you.
time.
There was a divorce in the middle.
Wait.
Long story.
So you guys, you guys were dating. He's the guy, the 19-year-old. That's awesome. Most 19-year-old guys would have hightailed it out of there. Like,
oh, absolutely.
Oh no, this is too much.
19 to 35, probably.
This chick, oh no, and he didn't, he stuck it out. And he too has had trauma. He too has dealt with all the stuff we dealt with after that night. And so it's been his journey as well as it's been my journey. But he watched me be in fight or flight, right. And for so many years tried to help me, tried to really be there for me. But I was so caught up in living this way that I couldn't see that. And so what I ended up doing is saying things like, this isn't your burden, it's mine. Like, it's fine, and that too isn't healthy. So,
do you think that led to the divorce, or did that play a part in it?
Oh yeah. I mean, he was, and I talk about it in the book. He had an affair. He had multiple affairs. but one that he actually got caught, or he knew he was going to get caught. So he fessed up. And then she became pregnant. And I was like, nope, not doing this. So I divorced him, and we weren't divorced very long. And we just realized that the universe had bigger plans for us.
So you had kind of trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
A layer cake of trauma.
Stackable trauma. Yep, for sure. Stackable trauma. And, but I will tell you, through my divorce and everything, I really figured out a lot about myself in just that, and how strong I can be. Like, I did find, but at the same time, like, I really took responsibility for my side of it, for my,
Yeah, there was probably some emotional avoidance going on your side.
Yeah. I mean, he had a wife, but he had only a half of a wife.
Sure.
I wasn't whole.
Yeah.
By any means. And I'm sure we'd been together since he was 19. And I think, and I tell him this all the time, he went through trauma too. And we've spent all these years working on me and not really diving into him. And I am a firm believer that if you don't deal with your trauma, behaviors will show up. And I feel like that was part of the reason why he was searching out for something different. And boy, did he find it. But we won't get into that. So, about 6 months after we divorced legally, we became friends. We got back to what the foundation of our relationship was, which was our friendship. And we were starting with a clean slate, because he had laid it all out on the table before our divorce, and I had laid it all out on the table during our divorce. And so, we went to, we knew that there was something still there. And we said, if we want to make this work, especially because we have children, that we needed to do marital counseling. And we didn't go into this lightly. So we did that. But getting back into my healing part, I did not, we had 2 kids. We moved from Southern California to Colorado in 97. And in 99, April 20th of 1999, I was working as a hairdresser in a salon that was close to Littleton, Colorado. And I took a break from my client, went into the back room. I turned on the TV, and the Columbine shootings happened.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Colorado.
That was like in the neighborhood we lived in. So Lachlan's, when she graduated elementary school, she was going to Columbine High School. It was like a mile from where I lived.
Wow.
It was, I had a visceral reaction. And remember, I had been told I was going to be fine for the rest of my life. Yeah. So as I was
it.
Totally, I had flashbacks. I turned pale. I was shaking. And I had not told my colleagues my stories. They had no idea what the heck was happening to me. I didn't know what was happening to me. And all I saw were the ambulances, the police, all the things that I saw that night were staring me in the face. And the kids were all around my same age. And, my colleagues were like, I don't understand. You're too young to have kids that go there. And I said, well, I don't. And she said, and you don't live in that area. And I said, no, I don't. And they were like, what's wrong with you? What's going on with you? And I said, I don't know. And I took a minute and I put that mask back on. I walked out. I did my clients for the rest of the day, all my appointments. Everybody around me was super upset. This was like horrible. But I had my mask on and I was hiding behind it. And I was telling myself that this isn't affecting me. It wasn't until I walked through the doors to get into my car and drive home, and all of those emotions came flooding back. 2 days I was spiraling. And in that spiraling, I had my suicidal ideation. And I really was struggling because I'm now a mom. And I didn't want to feel this way anymore, but I didn't want to leave my children. And my husband, being the smart man that he is and the observant man that he is, he stopped me at the door one day and he said, you have two choices. You're either going to get help or I'm putting you in a hospital. And I said, okay, I'll get help. I'm scared. This is a slippery slope. I don't know what to do. I need help. So I went to a physician who prescribed antidepressants because that's what they do. And then he handed me a card and he said, I want you to make an appointment for this therapist. And I literally laughed in his face. I said, 14 years ago, I went to a therapist. They couldn't fix me. I'm broken. What makes you think this is going to help me? And he said, you have no choice. So I made an appointment. And within the first 3 minutes of talking to her, she's told me, she said, I specialize in severe trauma. And I really specialize in PTSD. And she said, everything that you have told me, because I told her in the 3 minutes what I went through at 17 and what I was currently dealing with. She looked me in the face and she said, Susan, everything that you have gone through since you're 17 years old is normal because you have PTSD. And I was really confused because I was like, wait a minute, I'm not in the military. I didn't go to war. What do you mean I have PTSD? And she said, anyone who has gone through anything traumatic can experience PTSD. But what you need to know is that PTSD isn't something that goes away. It's something you learn to manage. And in those words, I always say it was like, for me, it was like the sky opened up and rainbows shot out, because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel crazy. I didn't feel broken. I felt like I finally had this person that I can be vulnerable with. I trusted her. And she was going to be the person to guide me on my healing journey. And for the first time in my life, that gave me hope.
Well, there's something about once you can put a name to something, or once you can identify, if you don't know what the problem is and you can't identify it, like that's where the hopelessness sets in. Like, oh, well, like you said, I'm just broken.
You need a point of origin.
Right. So once you get that, I won't call it an answer, but once you get that answer, it's, like, okay, I see what this problem is now. We have a name for it. There's things like I can start chipping away at this block and learning to live with this shit.
Yep, for sure. And and she knew. She's just like, man, I know I have my hands full.
So that was in 99.
99. Yep. And she was really smart about it though. And what she did is she didn't want to like throw every modality at me all at once. And so we just chipped away with each thing that I was dealing with currently. So I had not slept, and sleep deprivation leads to a lot of mental health issues for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Familiar.
And were you on medication this whole time?
I was.
For antidepressants, yeah.
Yep. Yep. I was on Paxil.
Okay.
And so I wasn't sleeping. So we had a conversation around why I wasn't sleeping, what was happening to me as I went to lay down and go to sleep. And I told her every time I shut my eyes, I saw that scene. I saw my dad. I felt the fear. And it kept me up at night. I didn't want to go down that road. I didn't want to relive that feeling. And she said, okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to have you journal. And I kind of laughed at her. I was like, really? Really? And she said, yeah, you can journal, you can write. It could be music. You could do art. There's different ways of journaling. But what you're doing is you're getting what's in your head, swirling in your head, out. And that allows your brain to relax, and then you're changing your state. And I thought, okay, this is wishy-washy stuff. Like, come on now. And so she gave me some prompts, some very simple prompts. And she said, I want you to do this before you go to bed every night. So just try it for a week. You're going to see me next week, and then come back and we'll talk about it. And I said, okay. And everything in my being was like, this isn't going to work. This is not going to work. This is going to be a waste of my time. And the second night in, I slept. And I was like, oh, what? So when I went back to her the next week, she said, okay, so how did that go? And, how did you feel? And I said, okay, well, I hate to admit this, but okay, it worked.
Well, there's something about getting it out of your head, right? And organizing your thoughts on paper, and some of the stuff you write down. Because when I was going through my whole thing, I took to journaling, right? And I would write some stuff down, and some things I would write and be like, you're crazy. Like, that's so stupid. And once you finally see it, you get it out of your mind, you either say it or it's on paper, you can identify it. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, okay. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Yep. So I would write things, and then I would just burn the pages. Yeah. And I would just get rid of them.
Yep. Well, I do that now, but I didn't do that then. And so journaling became, and everybody can do it. It's something that's simple, but it's a very powerful modality. The next thing that we attacked was my anxiety, and changing, just calming and bringing my state to a more of a calm place. And so we started getting into tapping and using affirmations.
What's tapping?
Changing the mindset. So tapping is, it's almost like an anchor. Okay, so if you're using an affirmation, you would tap your forehead, you would tap your heart, you would tap your, wherever you feel, because everybody, when you have a reaction, when you're having a panic attack, whatever, when you're feeling that anxiety, it shows up somewhere in your body. Sure. And so the tapping is almost like a reprogramming of the brain. So you're messaging your brain with something different, and you're using the tapping as an anchor.
Okay.
Because it's physical. Then we started getting into breath work and one of the modalities with that is called box breathing. I don't know if you've ever done that before,
Yeah, absolutely.
but it is amazing what it does. And so you're actually using two things at the same time. You're controlling your breath and being very aware of your breathing, but you're also doing visualization because you're visualizing the box.
Okay.
So that too really calms your system. And so like we just started diving into when I was ready is when she introduced me to EMDR, which a lot of vets use. And that was probably the hardest thing I did. But again, you know, she had sent me to somebody because she didn't do EMDRs, but the person she sent me to, I felt comfortable with, and I felt safe, and I felt like she was going to be able to guide me and, you know, not just take me to that space and leave me there. And so doing those sessions really helped me to see things a little bit different. And
different in what way, if you don't mind?
So basically, you know, anytime it was just reprogramming my brain. And so anytime I would think about that night and how I felt, she would have me think about, because I was so caught up in myself in that she would help me to kind of like take myself out of that scenario and like talk to myself at
like what
17.
Advice would you give yourself type deal?
Yeah, like that kind of like, okay, I'm here for you. You know, you're seeing this thing, but I just want you to know I'm here, you know, that kind of thing. And so it gave me a sense of not feeling as scared, not feeling as frightened. And so, you know, that was the beginning. That was the beginning of my healing. And it just continued on. I stopped seeing her because I felt like I was at a good place.
Do you feel like it would have been less effective had you have not done all of them in that sequence or left out a portion? Like if you never did the journaling, like it was kind of building blocks, right?
Yes. And it was building blocks, and it was like baby steps. I say it's kind of like baby steps, you know, and especially, but when it comes to therapy, you don't want to throw people, you know, you don't want to throw people into a bunch of stuff because it gets overwhelming and you're already overwhelmed, right? When you're overwhelmed, your body shuts down, right? Your mind shuts down and you are completely closed off to anything that is going to be helpful. So the one thing that I tell people all the time, and the most important part to my message, is making sure that if you're choosing to get healthy, if you're choosing to reach out and get healthy, one, make sure that you are seeking out someone who is trauma competent in the type of trauma you're dealing with. Because if there's a lot of people, a lot of therapists out there that say they're trauma informed, right? Well, that's fine and good, but that's kind of generalization, you know? So, and there's different types of trauma, you know, there's war, people dealing with military, there's first responders, there's law enforcement that see different things and have, and I'll talk to you about that. And, there's, sexual assault victims and whatever, right? If you're not going to the right person and you're not feeling like you can be vulnerable with that person, vulnerability is the key. It is absolutely 100% the key. And it is the thing that will drive you to your true healing. If you're not able to be vulnerable with that person, true healing is not going to happen. Right.
Because you're still playing the shell game. You're still wearing the mask. You're still not getting to the root of the problem.
Exactly. So, and I tell people, like, don't waste your time. If you will know in the first 5 minutes if this is your person.
Yeah.
And the other side of that is like, this is your healing. This isn't their healing. It's yours. And you're investing your time, you're investing your emotions, and you want to make sure that this person is going to be able to guide you in the right way. So when I talked to law enforcement, I was honored to speak to the Los Angeles police delegates last year, September of 2023, in San Diego at their conference. I am a speaker. And so I was a keynote speaker at their conference. And what I talked about was the fact that, and I saw this in my own father, the funny story is that he would come home and we'd be eating spaghetti dinner and he'd be talking about the dead guy that he just found that was dead for 4 days.
Gross.
And as a kid, I was like, oh, Dad, really? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to hear that. Like, that's gross. But it reminded me that, like, the job, you can't get away from it. It comes home with you. It lives with you.
And that's probably part of the personality of the kind of people that do these types of jobs. Like, you don't
and can do them, right? There's some people who sign up and can't deal with it, and then to no fault of their own. But there's people who stay on.
Yeah, yeah. Your dad was probably we would probably call it a meat eater nowadays in our line of work, but he was probably always a natural protector, probably always was like that.
And I bet everybody looked up to him.
Yeah, he probably was well respected and regarded.
Yeah.
And he probably, I would assume, probably made you and your brother feel like bulletproof because he was probably always there. So I think there's probably a natural, the kind of folks that do these jobs always have those characteristics,
Yeah, for sure. But what I did, in hindsight, when I look at it, he was really good at compartmentalizing. And so when I talk about
also characteristic,
right.
For better and for
worse. So
when
I talk to law enforcement, now I also remember having conversations around officers who sought out help, were chastised, were, found to be weak people because they couldn't handle the job. Well, that conversation is starting to change.
Yeah.
Because compartmentalization it'll come back to you. It will, if you don't deal with, you're human. We're all human, right? So if you don't deal with your emotions, they're going to come back to you. And the conversation now, and the one that I'm trying to get out to law enforcement, is that you are human. And you do see things that most people would never want to see on a daily basis.
especially based around cities like LA. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's a multiple times a day event.
Yeah, exactly. And as humans, we can only handle so much before we snap, before we break, before, and so in looking at law enforcement, for instance, that is the reason why all these years there was so much addiction issues, alcoholism, all these different ways of coping. Divorce was high and still can be. And so I think that the conversation needs to be that a couple of different things need to happen, in my opinion, is one, the job isn't for everyone. And just like any other job, not everybody is the right fit. And I feel like part of that, I feel like mental health testing should be more intense before they even go into the police academy.
It's like setting a really good baseline before they even
Absolutely.
So you got somewhere to start from. Yeah.
And it's no fault of anyone, right? But at the same time, if you've gone through trauma and you haven't dealt with it, and then you go out there and you put yourself in a highly stressful situation, mistakes are going to be made. And those mistakes could either cost you your life or someone else's life. And so I feel like it's important. The other thing, and this is what I talk to the delegates about, is that making sure that once you are on the force, that you have the support. And it is not looked upon that you are weak. That's actually a strength, to recognize that I'm not okay and I need to deal with this, right? Because I don't want to make the wrong choice. I don't want to put myself in harm's way, or anyone else for that matter. So I think it's a really important conversation to have, and just reminding them that they are human and you do need to take care of yourself and your mental health.
The organizations have a lot of work to do on their own, obviously, because it's still, I would assume it's still thought about, at least from like the police officer in the field's perspective, that if I speak up, I might have to turn in my badge for a little bit, turn in my gun, and I'm no longer useful to the team, right? And you sign up because you want to be useful to the team. You want to be the one, the dependable one that everybody can count on.
Right.
So admitting that is admitting, potentially defeat, because it could be a career ender, right? If you go in there, you're like, hey, I'm too messed up. But then, you are the guy who is letting the team down.
Absolutely.
Or the gal, right? And so there's a lot of work that the individual needs to do. And I don't know
how that's going to happen or work, but
that's tough.
Well, we had did a past episode where one of the guys, he was a pilot, and he talked about the pilots union they did it on their own. And I didn't know, have you seen any of the LAPD union or I think the LAPD union is like police protective.
The Police Protective League. They're the ones that hired me to speak. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So they're going down the right path. And that was something, Joey Johnson's episode, he talked about that they at American Airlines, they actually have a program called the Wingman program where if you kind of need to take a knee and take a break, the union will cover your expenses while you're not working, essentially. And I wonder if law enforcement unions might be able to do something similar, because I think at the end of the day, and it would probably help the municipality or the state or federal law enforcement retain folks if they let them take a knee for a while. And I think in the military, we were onto that. but it was really in its infancy, and it kind of briefed well. The problem was there's still warring that needed to be done, and it takes a long time to build a cohesive team and folks to go over there and do that. So we kind of talked a big game. I don't know if it really ever hit its stride like it probably could have.
Well, it needs more buy-in from the people on our end, right? Like,
Yeah.
sure, like we talked about before, you guys had the psych and you had to go see the psych. It was mandatory. I had no idea we had one.
Yeah.
You know,
that's true.
You know what I mean? So it's for different people. Like when you get smaller towards the top to like where you were at, it's easier for them to select guys like, hey, we really need you to do. But then you always have cannon fodder, you know, for lack of a better term, that, you know, we don't have time to save the whole force, but we can save the lieutenants and the captains and the people at the top.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but
no big deal.
No big deal. But the real thing to that is this is a leadership problem. Is really what it boils down to.
It has to be from the top down.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that was at the time last year, the chief of police, I met him. He was actually on the force same time as my dad. That was a crazy story. So I spoke, like I said, I was a keynote speaker, and there was another gentleman who was from Rochester, New York. He was a beat cop, and he went on a call for a young man who was having a mental break. His mom had called the police, and he knew this area, and I think he knew this family. And so he said, I'll take care of it. I'll go. And so he did. And he went in, and we saw his body camera footage, which was brutal. He went in and he just told this kid, you know, I don't know what you're going through right now, but I'm here to help you. I don't want any trouble. Like, let's get you the help that you need. You know, well, anyways, a little bit later, a scuffle, the kid attacked him with a knife and stabbed him in the eye. There was a neighbor and I believe a postal service worker who was outside and could hear him screaming. So they came in and they jumped on the assailant. He had been stabbed 30 times. He was bleeding pretty heavily. Backup finally arrived and took him to the hospital, and he almost died. He's currently still on the force, and he's blind in both eyes. And he stood up there and he said he was 30 years. He's been 30 years on the force. He said it took this time, this incident, for them to make him see a therapist. And he said, when I started going through therapy for this, I was totally hesitant because of my machismo, is what he called it. And he said, you know, when he was in his therapy, he realized, oh my God, if I had taken the time to do this for myself earlier, some of my relationships wouldn't have been as difficult or affected by his job. And he said, we are not the job. He said, we all have this machismo, and that shit needs to go.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of our friend Doug is a cop. Yeah. That's Doug. Our friend Doug is he's a former law enforcement officer, retired now, and that's basically what he said. If he would have known, it was, you know, he didn't want to be the weak guy, and it wasn't until he had some breaks that he kind of had to deal with it. And that point, it was, you know, the damage was kind of done.
Well,
Yeah.
I think there's a line to walk there, right? Because there needs to be some kind of bravado, probably especially in law enforcement. Like I said, like we said before, for war, like we gear up, we know, hey, I'm in Iraq, I'm in Afghanistan. Today we're going out, we're hitting a house. Like I'm expecting to find myself knee deep in shit before dinner time.
Yeah,
right?
there's going to be violence.
There's going to be violence today, but like as far as law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs even, right? It's always in the back of their mind, but it's never like, it's not, we're just moving to contact, right? We're, hey, you know, I got this kid who's having trouble, probably even knows the kid, right? So you want to go in there with an open heart and be like, hey, I'm here to help. You weren't expecting, you know what I mean? You don't have your gun drawn. You're not expecting this kid to stab you in the face, you know?
And I think it's easier for soldiers too, because it's either offense or defense, and we're killing folks or we're not. There's I'm not trying to help. I'm not trying to understand. I'm not trying to, the situation isn't going to go completely sideways. We're there for a job. And I think for law enforcement and even like Tyler's brother's a firefighter, and like some of the stories he tells, you're like, holy geez.
Yeah. They see some stuff too. Well, and Denny was his name. Denny just, you know, he was just like, I just realized that, you know, I should have been taking care of myself a lot sooner. That machismo it's bullshit. Like you are not weak if you are seeking out help. You are human. And he said, and I almost jumped out of my chair. My husband had to hold me down. He said, hurt people hurt people. And I was like, oh, because I say that too. But hurt people who heal help people heal.
Right.
So when you heal yourself, the people around you can see that. And if they want that for themselves, you are giving that safe space to say, hey, I went and out, got help because I wasn't right. I need to get my head straight, right? And I feel like that needs to happen too. That message needs to happen, that it's not weakness. It's actually strength to be able to stand back and go, I'm not right. Like, I'm not right. I'm overly stressed. I'm, going through this in my personal life and I'm taking it on the job, or I'm taking the job and I'm bringing it home. And it's affecting my kids. It's affecting my wife or, my husband or whatever. Right. So Denny had a really amazing message as well. And he and I had to speak after him, which was like, kill me now, because I was in tears. I was like I looked at my husband and I'm like, I have to follow that.
No,
oh thanks. My God. And so I did, I went up and I spoke, and, some of the people, as I was looking at people in their faces, I could see the wheels turning. I really felt like I had some optimism in that room. And I'm really grateful that this is a conversation that is starting to be more prevalent. And I think because of all the things that have happened within law enforcement in the last, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, and a lot of things have come to light. I think mental health, it needs to be key. I have had conversations with vets, and you brought up something that I've heard. I have talked to a couple of vets actually, who said the same thing. When you are in the military, you are taught to kill. That is your job, right? Or a part of your job. It is a mentality. And this gentleman he got in after 9/11. And once he got in, he realized that 9/11 and the reasoning behind stuff wasn't what he thought it was. And he was hurt. He was in Iraq and he got hurt. And he said, I'm done. 10 years, I've done 2 tours and I'm done. And he got out. And he said, Susan, the first people that came after me were law enforcement. And he said, I have really good friends that are in law enforcement, but they worked on themselves before they became officers. They sought therapy. They worked through their PTSD, and they are doing great at their job. I turned down every single offer, and the reason I did is because I told them, we are not taught to de-escalate. We are taught to escalate. And now I've had 10 years of this training, and it takes a while to unravel that and retrain for something different, for a different mindset. And he told them, I'm not mentally capable of being in law enforcement right now. You don't want me. Because I was taught to kill. I was not taught to de-escalate. And that was like a huge aha for me, because I didn't realize that. But I guess it happens.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so hard for the American public, especially during Iraq and Afghanistan, I think the general consensus was, well, why aren't we complete there? Why isn't this done? Or why is it dragging on? And, this is probably an unpopular opinion, but the real truth is because the American public probably can't stomach what really needs to happen if you don't want bad people around.
Yeah.
It is violent, and it's not, there's no such thing as a politically correct war, not to get into that, but war is violent, and there's no humane way to do it. And so it's almost like by trying to do it nicely, and you end up prolonging this for 20 years and
get nothing out of it.
You get nothing out of it. Where if you kind of look back at World War II, it was ultra violent, but it was 4 years long and it was done. And ultimately, you could argue the world was a better place. And I'd probably say Tyler and I both say there's no point to war. Like after living it, like what was the point? Like it doesn't make any sense. But but
oh yeah,
I hear that a lot from a lot of vets.
Yeah, and I used to think I remember when I was when I was first joining the Army, the Vietnam guys. I remember just hearing these older Vietnam vets say exactly what I'm saying now, and I used to think like, "Oh, you guys are just out of touch. It's different now." And now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm like, man, I just kind of feel used by a machine that didn't really. There was no real point to this other than to make some defense contracting company a lot of money. And anyways, we don't need to go down that.
Yeah, that's how this gentleman felt as well. And that's why he got out. But I just, I like to educate myself on mentalities, right? And so that was a really great conversation for me to see how everything affects, especially for law enforcement. Like, I get very frustrated, like anyone else, when something goes awry, someone is killed. that shouldn't have been, or, but, and I did, God forbid, I made a video after George Floyd. And my video was more about mental health, really. But I got backlash from people who knew me, who said, "How dare you have an opinion about this, given who you are?" And I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Well, that just escalated the people that you don't need to be having your
Exactly.
life rapidly. You were
like,
like, hey,
thanks for showing up. Bye.
Right. See ya. Bye-bye. Yeah, but it's just like, I do have feelings around things, but and I feel like the more I talk to my hope and my goal is, the more I talk to law enforcement about what happened with my dad, but also like making them realize, yes, you're human. Like, you're human, and as a human, we need to take care of ourselves, and it's not just physically, it's mentally. And nobody wants to have a life where they feel like they're beat down every single day, and then you come home and you're not in a good mindset. So it's really taking away from your outside relationships.
And even if you are that officer, that somebody in the Army or Marine Corps, whoever, who wants to be the baddest person in the room, right? Mm-hmm. Once you organize your brain clutter, you know what I mean? And you deal with your inside, whatever it is you have going on, and you can organize that and calm all that stuff down, you're going to be far better at your job. You're going to recognize things like way before they come to you. You know what I mean? You can read a situation because you're not thinking about anything else, right?
Absolutely.
You can see 10 steps ahead because your mind is clear.
Absolutely.
So to think that you don't need to work on the mental aspect as much as your sweet bench press
right.
is kind of crazy. It's backwards, but it's by what we've been taught by the sweet 1980s movies with, Stallone, Schwarzenegger, everybody I always looked up to as a kid.
Right.
Your brains are more important than your pecs, I think is what it boils down to.
Absolutely.
And you have to work on your brains as much as those pecs.
And, if your mental health is in check, you're going to be able to do your job at a high level.
Right. You're going to be able to fight the bad dudes if that's what you want. If the end result is you want to be able to fight bad dudes effectively, you need to organize your brain. Absolutely.
100%.
Was there a particular moment when you realized that you'd turned the corner in your healing process? Because and this is a 2-part question. So that's the first part. And the second one is, every time that you tell this story, now that you've gone through this healing, does it get any easier to tell it?
Yeah, it does. It's really funny because every time I do a podcast and I'm telling my story or I'm up on stage, I'm able to glean a lesson from what I'm saying. And I will tell you, the one thing that really did it for me was writing my book. I had to make sure that my mind was right, my mental health was right. I had to make sure that I was in a place where I had enough tools, because I knew in writing this book, I was going to be the most vulnerable and authentic that I have ever been, which is terrifying, mind you, because for 3 reasons. One, I really had to dive deep, and I had to relive and refeel all of the emotions that I felt through this journey. Then I also, I had repressed memories come up, and I had some realizations come up and had to kind of take that all in. It took me 4.5 years to write this book because there were days where I was, I was putting it all on paper and it was a lot. And I had those days where I had to stand back and say, you know what, I'm giving myself grace. I'm a practicing realtor. And I was like, I am not dealing with clients today. Like, I have nothing left. I can recognize when I'm depleted and I can't give anything out. Like, I'm done. And on those days, I just try to find things that give me joy, whether it's taking a walk or, being in a park or, whatever it is. And so in writing the book and just really diving and all of that, the fears that came up for me were, what was this going to do to my relationship with my mom? Because in telling my story, I had to tell hers. And our relationship has never been healthy. So I had that fear. The other fear was it going to affect my husband again enough where we end it, like he leaves me? The third was the men that were involved and were convicted. Some of them were still in prison. And so putting myself out there, I had this like little fear in the back of my head is, could they come after me? Would there be any retaliation for me telling the story? And every time I had those fears come up, I had to step back and ask myself, why are you writing this book? And the answer was always the same, that this was my purpose, to give people out there the message of hope and healing and letting them know they're not alone. And so every time the fear came up, I would focus on those faceless people out there that needed to hear my words, needed to hear my story, needed to hear my message. And so that's why, I allowed myself to really be as vulnerable as I could.
When you said that you and your mom, were kind of always at odds, and this might sound like a strange question, but do you and your mom share a lot of the same similarities as far as how your personality is, or are you guys completely oil and vinegar, or is it oil and water, oil and vinegar?
It's oil and water.
I think oil and vinegar is for a
oil and vinegar. Yeah, it's a salad thing.
Yeah. That's a salad.
Yeah.
But,
nailed it.
Well, I will tell you one of the things that I realized as I was writing the book, and I was realizing the extent of our relationship as far as if it was healthy or not. What I realized is that my mom has a narcissistic personality. And so we are polar opposite. But honestly, it took me 54 years. I started writing the book at 50, and it came out last year, January of 2023. And I just realized, oh my God, my mom's a narcissist. And the reason why we butted heads, the reason why is because when it first happened, my mom having that personality, that type of personality, she kind of turtled into herself. And then in doing that, she couldn't cope with, she struggled with coping, and her coping was drinking, which led to more trauma for me and my brother. And so in realizing this, I sat back and I said, whatever happens out of this book, I'm going to be okay with. And after the book came out, or when it was coming out, in the 4.5 years, let's just put it this way, 4.5 years, she never asked me about the book. She'd like say something because my brother would say something, but she never wanted to know what it was about or what I was writing or any of that. And that was hurtful. But at the same time, I didn't vilify her in this book whatsoever. And before it came out, I sat down with her and I told her what was in the book. I was totally honest with her. And so that she would be well aware and would not be surprised. And I thought that the conversation went pretty well, I thought. And when I gave her her book, she set it with her mail and walked away from it. And I thought, okay, cool. And I left, and about 45 minutes later, she called me and she said, I picked up the book and I read the first 2 chapters and it's written very well. And I said, well, thank you. And she said, I'm proud of you. And in that moment, I said, okay, I'm gonna keep this. I'm gonna take that in. But on the other side of that was like, she's not done yet. So the jury's kind of out, right?
Yeah.
I never heard that she finished it. I asked my brother, and he said, oh, yeah. Yeah, she wants me to go to the lawyers to take you out of the will. So that we went no contact, sure. Basically is what happened. And I will tell you that I was at peace. I have found my peace in that. And that was not an easy thing to do either. But in this journey, I have realized who I am innately and what kind of relationships I want around me and to be a part of. And healthy ones are my priority.
Right. And you can't have a healthy one without 100% pure, honest truth. Like,
absolutely.
The first time when the marriage ended, right, is because it was built, I'm going to say on a bed of lies, but it wasn't structurally complete. But it wasn't until you guys came together and like laid it all out, as you said before, that you're able to actually, again, focus on what the issue may or may not be. Is this worth solving? Because now that the dust is settled, we see everything for what it is, and once you put something out there, I've been in the business in the last couple of years of writing people off that just don't fit. And not because we have different opinions, but it's just kind of like, I don't have time for whatever it is you're bringing into my life because it's not good. You know what I mean?
You can't handle that drama. I mean, that's how I'm the same way. Like I want to have a relationship with everybody, but if you bring some drama to the meeting, I don't got a lot in the tank left for that. So
yeah. Well, and that's a part of the healing part, right? And I have one of my chapters is rose-colored glasses because that's how I walked around. I didn't realize what was healthy and what was not. I just took my relationships as they were fine. And I even looked at that about with my marriage. You know, my husband and we got married at 21 and 24 and had our first kid. I was 27. I was 24, my daughter. And then 27 when I had our son. And so, you know, I think part of us too is that we had been dating so long. We'd been dating 5 years when we got engaged. And so it was almost like we were following a plan, and it wasn't our plan. It was everyone else around us' plan. Like, okay, you've lived with each other this much time. It's time to get engaged. And then it's time to have a child. And, you know, and so I don't think either one of us was ready to be married. But because we both felt like that was what we needed to do next kind of thing, we just did it. But neither of us were mentally ready for it. And so it caught up to us. And so,
do you think if you hadn't have gotten married at, you know, prematurely, and hadn't gone through that first divorce, you would have been kind of in the place you are now? Or do you think that's all kind of part of the process?
No, I think it was all part of the process. I mean, he has been, you know, he went out of the marriage. And of course, in the beginning, I was angry and everything. But in hindsight, you know, when I looked at it, I thought, you know, there's a reason behind his behavior. And there's a reason why he's choosing to do the things that he's choosing. And for me, the realization was that he too went through trauma. He went through some childhood trauma and then, you know, and then more trauma at 19. So he too has had stackable trauma as well. He has been engulfed in my trauma. And I was doing all the work on my end to heal myself, but he was not. And part of it was I felt like he didn't feel like he needed it. The one thing that I think people do is they compare trauma to trauma. And so some people will be like, oh, your trauma is way worse than what I've ever gone through, right? Well, everybody's trauma is their trauma. Like, I don't compare my situation to anyone else's. Everybody's trauma is everybody's trauma. And I respect that. You know, my biggest thing is I always want to give people a safe space to tell their story. And I've always done that with my own husband and tried to give him a safe space. But it's taken us 39 years
of work, 39 years of work.
We're
right?
Still working through it, you know, and it's ongoing. Just because I wrote a book doesn't mean that I'm done. You just continue to evolve. And the one thing I could say is that the thing that I'm most grateful for is if I had not gone through everything I went through, I would not be the person that I am today. And I am grateful for that because for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm the person I was meant to be. And it's taken me a long road to get here. And it's not easy, you know, doing that kind of work for yourself sucks.
Yeah. to put it lightly.
It's not easy, but I will tell you, when you do, and you get to the other side of your pain, it's priceless. It's life-changing. So
yeah, if it's easy, everybody be doing it.
exactly. And for me, having kids, I have 3. I have 2 sons and a daughter. And my youngest is actually my husband's child with the other woman. But he's my kid. She just gave birth to him. That too has been a journey. And the one thing that I wanted to do is change the legacy. My legacy is what happened to my dad for myself. But I want my legacy for my children. I want my children to know that no matter what life hands you, you can heal from it. You can find strength in it. You can find healing, and you can find lessons. So that is really important to me, to be able to give that to my adult children. And when I'm not here on this earth, I want them to say that their mom was someone who rose up and didn't fall into the victimhood and became a survivor. That's important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll never get to that point if you're always running away from your problems. It doesn't start to get better until you stop and turn around and you face whatever demons are chasing you. And I think that's when the real change happens, because you can lie to yourself all you want, but it's not until you can face it and stand in front of it and accept it for what it is. And like, hold on, my brain just shut off.
That's okay.
Anyway, nailed it.
Well, that's kind of why this podcast is called Alone and Unafraid.
My bad.
It's you gotta just do it, and nobody's gonna come and save you. And I think that's a legacy worth living or leaving behind for your kids, and you're kind of breaking that generational trauma, and so that they don't have to deal with that. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a different parent, I think the one thing that I gleaned from my mother and my relationship with her is that I learned what I didn't want for my kids. And I am very close with my kids, and I'm very proud of that because it took work. I came from generational abuse. Like my great grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, right? And when I had my first kid, my husband and I decided to take a child psychology class. And in this class, she was a nurse, therapist kind of person. She was teaching this class, and I remember what she said to me stuck. And what she said was, everything that you're dealing with from your childhood that we're talking about right now stays in this room and does not go out that door with you, because once it goes out that door, you're going to put it on your child. And I was like, that was a big aha for me. That was the moment that I was like, I will not ever let my children feel the way I felt growing up, ever. And that was a turning point for me and being a mom. So I have always been the kind of mother that never negates my kids' feelings and listen to them. But at the same time, I allow them to self-discover as they got older, especially You know, my husband has this saying, small children, small problems, big children, big problems, right? And so they're just different. And the fact that I have dealt with a lot of these mental health things, suicidal ideation, all of that stuff, I knew what to look for. And when my kids were struggling, I knew what to say to them. I knew how to support them. I gave them everything that I didn't have when I was going through it at an early age. And
I think that's a very mom thing to do, because dads aren't. That's why I got this podcast, because I'm just, hopefully they listen to this and they get it from this.
Well, you know, and they probably will. And honestly, I will say that my husband, he grew up in a family, and I love my in-laws, but they didn't like to handle their issues.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
they were the silent generation. You know, you don't air out your dirty laundry. You don't, you know, whatever. And he and his sisters just kind of were like a band of thieves. You know what I mean? They were like, we got each other, like mom and dad, and we're just, you know, and, you know, they got away with a lot. But at the same time, like when I was dating him in the beginning, he saw the abuse. He saw what my mom was capable of. And it was a different world for him. And so when we became parents, like he too was like, we can't be our parents. We've got to find a happy medium. We've got to figure out what kind of parenting skill is going to be the best for our kids. And it's been a learning experience. And he's really made a lot of progress, you know, over the years, in opening his mind to a lot of different things. And he's a very accepting and loving father. And he's working on himself. And I'm proud of him for that, because he does want to be a good man and a good husband and a good dad. And it's not easy for dads either. And, you know, so, and like I said, he comes from parents where you don't air your dirty laundry. And so, but he also is married to me, who's like, oh yeah, we're going to air it out. We're going to sit in it for a minute and we're going to work this out. Right. And so, you know, it's just, it's a journey. And that's what he and I both say is like, this has been a wild journey.
So what's next for Susan? What's on the horizon? What are you working on right now?
Oh my goodness. Well, one of the things that I'm doing is I'm really trying to get on more stages. Since the book came out last year, I've been on like 5 different stages all over. And I love doing podcasts. I am going to work on a secondary book. This is, I started Lyft driving last year because real estate got a little funky. And I've been a realtor for 14 and a half years. And I really wanted to start to find something that would help me with the coaching skills. I'm a resiliency coach too. And so I figured Lyft driving was great because you're meeting new people and everything. And I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And it ended up the first 2 weeks of Lyft driving, I had a couple of conversations. I had a conversation with a young lady, and she was a marketing director. And she said, "Why isn't your book in your car?" And I said, "I don't know." And she said, "You should have your book in your car." And I was like, okay. And I ignored her.
As we all do.
As we all do. And the next week, I had another woman who was the head of her company's marketing department. And she said the same thing to me. It's like the universe just keeps like pounding things in front of me. And
you're like, nah.
Yeah, nah.
I'm good.
And so she said the same thing. Why isn't your book in your car? And so I was like, okay. I will put my book in my car. It was the best thing I ever did because people will pick it up and start reading it, and it creates a conversation. And moving through that conversation, like I said before, I try to give people a safe space to be vulnerable and to know that they're safe. So I have had the most incredible conversations with people and hearing their stories. And I felt like this was the universe saying, first of all, when that happens, when I have these conversations, when I make a difference, when I have people get out of my car and say, I got into this lift today for a reason. I needed to hear your message. And sometimes I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Like, I just, it's a lot, but at the same time, it just reminds me that I'm living in my purpose. And that is like the best thing ever. When I can make a difference in someone's life. So I've decided I'm probably going to be working on another book called Lessons from the Lyft Driver.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, that's pretty rad.
It's pretty incredible. The stories are absolutely amazing and really eye-opening, because what I realized is there's a lot of people out there that have had trauma in their life, but because it was a childhood trauma and because it was an everyday event and their environment, this was their environment all the time, and they felt like this was a normal thing, they don't realize the damage that it's caused. And I've had those conversations where it is literally a realization that the abuse that they suffered when they were a child was trauma, and that, they needed to work on that to get to sobriety.
Right.
Just absolutely amazing stories that I have been so grateful to be able to meet these people and in some sort of way give them some hope.
You should do a TED Talk.
I have been trying to get on TED Talk for 2 years now.
Yeah, our buddy Doug was trying to do that, but we should definitely hook you and Doug up, because I feel like you guys, he's got a podcast coming out. His book, the book's not far. It's close to coming out, right?
Yeah, I don't think he's officially said the release date.
Yeah, he hasn't said it, but I feel like you guys would, your purpose and themes match very well. So his podcast and his book are forthcoming. So I think it would be great. What's the best way to get in touch with you if you want to do resiliency coaching? Is your website the best way to find you?
Yeah.
That's SusanSnowSpeaks.com.
Yes.
Com.
Yep. That's it. Yep. And I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok now. I didn't want to get on TikTok.
Nobody does.
I didn't want to.
But now you can't get off, because now you're laying in your bed at 10 o'clock going all the way through the talks.
I think that it's a pretty amazing tool that could be used to really create community. And So my hope is with me doing that, that the resiliency coaching part will come out, and just allowing people to know that they're not alone, again, and that they can reach out, that they, that I am creating a community of a safe space for them. And so I am going to do my story in parts, and put it out there. This whole marketing and social media and all that stuff it's a lot. But yeah, my website is the best way to get a hold of me. It has information about my book. My book is on Amazon. It's called The Other Side of the Gun: My Journey from Trauma to Resiliency. And it's paperback form. It's also on Kindle. I am working to get into a studio so that I can do my audiobook. And
that's the way we like it.
I will be doing my own. Yeah, I will be reading my own book.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah. So again, if you want to book Susan, you can go to her website, Susan Snow Speaks, all one word, susansnowspeaks.com. You can just click on the reserve now, schedule your time. If you want to do, you do keynote speaking, any kind of speaking. Also, you can do your resiliency coaching through the website. Yep. And we'll link to all that in the show notes. There will also be a link to your book on Amazon. And I like the symbology on the book cover, because the weapon, the gun that was chosen isn't, you didn't just randomly choose that gun, right? It has
yes,
a meaning behind it.
My dad was killed with a MAC-10.
Yeah. So, and that's what the weapon is on the cover of the book. And then there's a rose coming out of that. And I think it speaks volumes to, there's a lot of duality, like we talked about in the beginning of the title, the theme, the meaning. There's a lot visually in the cover that kind of makes you want to pick up and hear your story. So
yeah, that was definitely, so that was my idea. I knew that I wanted the cover to be powerful enough where someone would pick it up and want to read it. But yeah, I mean, it's the story is, the rose is basically just finding something beautiful out of something so horrific. And my middle son actually did that artwork. I was really proud mom. I gave him the idea and he ran with it. So,
well, I think it's great. And again, you can get the book on Amazon and go to susansnowspeaks.com. We'll have all that in the show notes for you. And Susan, I really want to thank you for spending the time with us. That's 2.0, 2 hours in the books.
2.0.
For
thanks for having me.
For this, I think it's great, and I love what you're doing. And I'm looking forward to the stories from the stories from the lift. Yeah, is that the title?
Lessons from the Lyft driver. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. You got to do an audiobook. You got to lead with the audiobook, because we know read very well.
I know smart. I'm not very smart.
Well, I think, I mean, people have been on my case to do the audiobook for a really long time.
Just because we're lazy, and I got a 35-minute drive into work, and so it's so much easier for me to listen to a book than to. And if I sit down and read it, I'm knocked out in 5 minutes. But this book it's really great. I highly recommend it. And go over to Amazon and buy it.
And buy it for your friends.
Yeah.
And Susan, I just want to say, I want to echo, I want to piggyback off what Thad was saying. And thanks for coming on, because as you were saying, you got to connect with people in your lift, and for Thad and me, through this podcast, it's been a way to connect with people from our community, people that we worked with that we never talked about any of this stuff with ever. And daily we get reached out to. They send us messages and they say it's been good for them to hear this. So you being a part of that is helping, our friends, our brothers. And thank you for coming on and doing that.
Well,
that means the world to us.
I'm honored. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.